In November of 2022, the world has changed forever. OpenAI released ChatGPT, a chatbot powered by artificial intelligence that can do incredible things. It can write emails, code scripts, songs, essays, and many more, and this is just the beginning. ChatGPT became the fastest growing app in history, reaching 1 million users in 5 days and 100 million users in 2 months. It's happening. The AI era is here. And smart people are the ones who can capitalize on this revolution and stay ahead of the competition. My name is Ryan Ahmed. I'm a professor and best-selling online instructor. I've been in the field of AI for over a decade now. I have published over 40 courses on artificial intelligence, machine learning, and Python programming, and I've taught over 400,000 students online from over 160 countries. I hold a master's and PhD degrees in engineering, and I hold an MBA in finance from McMaster University in Ontario, Canada. In this video, I will show you 10 ways to leverage ChatGPT as a programmer or a developer that will blow your mind away. I was shocked when I tested out numbers 7 and 10, and I'm sure they will blow your mind away as well. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this one. I will be releasing new content on artificial intelligence and machine learning, so please stay tuned. ChatGPT and GPT-4 can help programmers find the proper syntax for a given programming language. It's truly incredible. Let me show you what I mean. Hello everyone, and welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we will learn how to leverage ChatGPT to find the right programming language syntax. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to start with a basic example. I'm going to ask ChatGPT to tell me what is the syntax for a for loop in Python. Let's go ahead and test it out. In Python, the syntax for a for loop is as follows. You basically say for variable in, and you specify an iterable here. And basically it's explaining for you basically what a variable means, what an iterable means. Pretty incredible. And then you will see an example afterwards. So he is telling you that you can define, let's say, a list here, call it fruits. And then to write a for loop that is going to print every single item in a Python list, you just say for fruit in fruits, which is my list here. And then you print basically the fruit. So you're going to print apple, and then banana, and then cherry. And it's also showing you what the expected code output is going to look like. Of course, you can go ahead, copy that code, and then you can use it basically in your Jupyter Notebook or whatever IDE that you're using. Another key point as well that I would like to show you, basically what I showed you here is if you click on New Chat, you will find that here I upgraded to Chat GPT Plus. So it's around $20 per month as we speak right now. And what you could do is instead of leveraging GPT 3.5, you can go ahead and leverage GPT-4. Basically, GPT-4 is an advanced model. It's only available to Plus subscribers. And basically, GPT-4, it's kind of GPT 3.5 on steroids. It's a lot more powerful. It has advanced reasoning capability. And it's telling you it has as well an advanced complex instruction understanding and more creativity as well. If you just select GPT-4, you can go ahead and you can simply type in here. But notice that basically right now it's capped at 25 messages every 3 hours, even after you pay for the $20 subscription per month. Okay, so I'm going to head back to GPT 3.5. I just wanted to show you how we can leverage GPT-4 if you like. Okay, what if I would like maybe to learn Java, and I would like to learn how to declare a variable in Java? If you press enter, here we go. To declare a variable in Java, follow the following steps. You need to choose a name, decide on a data type, and then use the syntax data type variable name to declare that variable. And here we go, it's showing you how to basically declare an integer. Here, basically kind of all the details, assigning a value, for example, to your variable. And you can, of course, go ahead and copy that code if you like. Okay. What if I wanted maybe to learn about conditional statements or maybe if-else statements, for example, in Python, and I would like to learn the syntax? So I'm going to say, well, what is the syntax for performing conditional operations in Python? And here we go. In Python, you can use if statements to perform conditional operations. And here's the syntax. You just say if, and then you specify the condition, you add colon at the end, and then you do something if the if condition is true. You can also see here a code telling you if x is greater than 10, print x is greater than 10. And you can also see how to use elif or else if statement as well. And it's showing you an example along with the output corresponding to it. Again, pretty incredible. It's like, your favorite teacher talking to him or her and then getting an answer back again. Okay. What if I would like to maybe ask, okay, what about the syntax in C? So in a different programming language, I would like to learn about conditional statements. What you notice here is basically ChatGPT is quite smart because it remembers the previous conversation. So when I say, what about the syntax in C, it basically kind of understood that I'm referring to the previous here prompt when I asked about performing conditional operations. But instead of Python, now I'm basically referring to a C programming language. So you will find that kind of the answer here makes sense. And that's how you define an if-else statement in C programming language. And it's showing as well here an example. You can, of course, go ahead, copy that code, and it's showing you the output along with an explanation as well to that code. Okay, what if I would like to perform maybe data analysis using a powerful library known as pandas, if you're familiar with it, and I would like to know what is the syntax for filtering rows in a pandas data frame. You press enter, it's going to tell you, well, in pandas, you can use Boolean indexing to filter rows in a data frame. It's telling you that you basically can write a condition here and showing you also an example. This is an example of a data. Here we're using pandas data frame constructor method to create our pandas data frame df. And here you are filtering out basically the pandas data frame if the price is greater than 10. So this is the condition and it's showing you the output as well. We have been able to filter out that pandas data frame to only select simply these two values, 15 and 12. And that's why here I'm getting these two rows, that because the price here is more than 10. Again, pretty amazing because it's much better, to be honest, compared to just reading the documentation, because here you get kind of distilled information. It's right to the point with explanations, with example. Again, pretty amazing if you would like to learn any new language from scratch. Okay, what if you'd like maybe to explore data visualization and you would like to learn about the syntax to plot a line plot using matplotlib library? So here I'm going to say, what is the syntax to plot a line plot using matplotlib? Here we go. You can simply say, first you need to import matplotlib library, and then you say plt.plot, you specify x versus y. And here as well is showing you an example with actual values with x and y. I'm going to say just plt.plot and also adding the x label and y label associated with it. And that's again explanation as well associated with it. And here is telling you the image you are requesting does not exist or no longer available. But I'm assuming for the next iteration of maybe GPT-5, for example, or so, you will be able to see actual figures in here. It's going to be much, much better, I would say, experience compared to what we are experiencing right now. Okay, what if I would like maybe to experience with another library, maybe such as Seaborn, and I would like to learn how to plot, let's say, pair plot using Seaborn. Here we go. What is the syntax to plot a pair plot using Seaborn library? Here we go. To plot a pair plot, here we go. You need to import Seaborn as SNS. And then you just say sns.pairplot, then you specify the data. And again, here we have an example with real world data sets, kind of showing the price, rating, and reviews. Of course, it's a very small sample. You create a pandas data frame, and then you say sns.pairplot with the showing the pandas data frame df. Okay. What if I would like to make HTTP requests in Java? Let's go ahead and test it out. Here we go. How can I make HTTP request in Java? And here we go. To make HTTP request in Java, this is simply, if you're familiar with Java, this is exactly how you do it. And if you keep going, basically you can just copy that code and you can leverage it in your project. And it's also explaining to you exactly how you are setting the request method, how you're getting response code, and so on. Okay, and finally, we have our this is my favorite prompt. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, let's assume that you would like to learn Python, for example, and you would like to talk to ChatGPT as if you're talking to like an incredible professor, for example, kind of really knowledgeable professor that can kind of change the tone and the complexity of their explanation according to your prompt. So here I'm going to say, pretend that you are a Python professor Teach me the concept of variable assignment and data types. Let's go ahead. Here we go. Sure, I'll be happy to explain the concept of variable assignment and data types in Python. In Python, a variable is a name that refers to a value. To create a variable, you simply choose a name for the variable and assign a value to it using the equal operator or the assignment operator. For example, here is how you can create a variable, call it my variable, and then you assign a value to it. You say my variable equals to 10. After you create the variable, you can go ahead and print that variable, and then the output is going to be 10. I'm going to show you, okay, now let's talk about data types. Can I tell you, well, we have multiple data types in Python. We have numbers, strings, booleans, lists, and so on. And it's telling you an example here of a Python string, how you can print that string. And you can go ahead and see another data type. Here it shows the int data type, integer data type. It's also showing you the type casting, how you can convert from one data type to another. It's again pretty amazing. And well, maybe if you don't like that answer, can you maybe say the following, right? I don't understand this, or maybe I didn't understand this. Can you explain it in simpler terms? Let's go ahead. Well, sure. In Python, a variable is a name that represents a value. It's kind of toning down basically the examples here. And well, you can see pretty much, again, similar examples. You can say, can you explain the same concepts to a 10 years old, for example? Let's go ahead. Sure, in Python, you can use variable to remember things. Let's like giving a name to something you don't want to forget. Again, pretty incredible, kind of toning down the complexity of the topic to target, let's say, maybe 10 years old or even younger than that, which is, again, really amazing. It's kind of really creative as well. For example, if you want to remember what you have, that you have 10 toys, you can use a variable called toys to assign a values to it. You can say toys equals to 10. You can print toys, and you can print the value as well associated with it. Again, really amazing. You can use it as your perfect tutor available at your fingertips. And that's it. That's all I have for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you in the next lesson. ChatGPT and GPT-4 can help you define a study plan and find the best resources to master any programming language. This could be Java, Python, C, C++, and many more. Hello everyone, and welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we will learn how to develop a study plan and find the best resources using ChatGPT. So first, we can start by asking ChatGPT to develop a study plan for us in 1 week or less. And let's assume that we would like to start, maybe learn Python. So just say, define a study plan to study Python in 1 week or less. Then you press enter. And basically, what you find here is that ChatGPT is going to show you a detailed breakdown of the days. For example, he is telling you that learning Python in 1 week is an ambitious goal. It generally takes a little bit more time to actually master Python, but it gives you a quick overview. So day one, basics of Python. We're going to start with variables, data types, math operations, basic operations, and then cover loops and conditional statements and functions. Then in day two, we'll cover data structures, and then day three, cover object-oriented programming, or OOP. And then in day four, we'll cover file handling and modules. Day five, web development with Python. Then day six, cover data science with Python. And of course, covering here all the key libraries such as pandas, numpy, matplotlib. And then in day seven, cover the practice and review, kind of to practice your coding skills. That's actually pretty good. I would say this is a really clear outline and the study plan. And this is kind of pretty much similar to the study plan that I came up with when I started to learn Python. Okay, so the next question is, what if I have maybe 1 month to study Python instead of 1 week? So what's powerful about ChatGPT is basically it remembers the previous conversation. So now I'm saying, what if I have 1 month only? So basically it kind of remembers that I asked before to do or develop a study plan in 1 week, and now I'm changing it to 1 month. And here we go. Basically, it's telling you that having 1 month to study Python gives you more time to dive deeper into the language, which is great. And then it breaks it down by weeks. So in week one, we're going to cover basics of Python. And then in week two, we'll cover data structure and algorithms. And then in week 3, we'll cover object-oriented programming and software development. And then in week 4, we'll cover the advanced Python topics, basically covering decorators, generators, and also covering machine learning and data science applications as well. Okay, pretty good overall. Well, what if I wanted maybe to look for the best books to learn Python? Well, you can just ask ChatGPT to say, what are the best books to learn Python? And here we go. Basically, it's going to tell you these are the key, I would say, most widely adopted books. These are Python crash course for beginners. Here, book number 2, Automate the Boring Stuff with Python. And then Learning Python by Mark Lutz, and then Python for Data Analysis, and then Fluent Python. And basically, I verified some of these, and they are actually pretty accurate. And maybe if you're looking, for example, for courses, well, you can ask ChatGPT to basically say, what are the best 3 courses to study Python? And here we go. There are many online courses available to study Python. One of them is Python for Everybody by Charles Severance. And then the second one is Complete Python Bootcamp by Jose Portilla. And he is a fellow instructor on Udemy. And then the last course here is Python for Data Science and Machine Learning Bootcamp, also by Jose Portilla. So, well, because I teach as well on Udemy, maybe I would like to ask ChatGPT if it basically knows my courses. So I'm going to say, well, any Python courses by Dr. Ryan Ahmed, for example. So if you press enter, it's going to tell you, well, yes, there are some courses available. But basically what you see here, and this is a key important point when it comes to ChatGPT and generative models in general, basically sometimes they tend to hallucinate. What you notice is the first basically task here, first course, was actually pretty accurate, but then afterwards, these courses are actually some sort of hallucination in a way. They are not developed by me, for example, but basically ChatGPT is kind of trying to link the top courses, for example, in Udemy, with certain instructor, which is basically the name that I mentioned here. So you need to be careful when you use ChatGPT and to make sure that you verify the information. Okay. Well, what if you'd like maybe to learn, for example, JavaScript? So I'm going to say develop a curriculum for learning JavaScript. If you press enter, it's telling you, well, here is the curriculum. So we're going to start with an introduction to JavaScript, and then we'll cover data structures and functions, and then we'll cover advanced JavaScripts afterwards, and then browse APIs and document object model, or DOM for short, and then frameworks and libraries, back-end development with Node.js, and then advanced topics as well. Pretty good answer overall. Well, what if you'd like maybe to explore certifications or maybe exams? And let's assume that you're interested in learning about AWS or Amazon Web Services. So for example, you can go ahead and ask ChatGPT, are there any certificates or exams available to master AWS? Well, it's going to tell you yes, there are several certifications. And these are actually pretty accurate. Again, I confirmed all these and this information before. So AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner, that's one of them. There is a Solution Architect as well. There is also AWS Certified Developer and AWS Certified DevOps Engineer. And it's also giving you a quick explanation of who should take that certification and basically an overview as well of the, if you'd like maybe to, of course, explore the exam as well, and what kind of questions, you can go ahead and ask those questions further. Well, what if you'd like maybe to go for an interview at some point and you would like to know what kind of projects you would like to work on to master machine learning in Python? So, well, I can go ahead and ask ChatGPT what are some project ideas that I can work on to master machine learning in Python. And here we go. It's going to tell you, you can basically use machine learning to predict house prices. And this is kind of an example of a machine learning regression, basically task. You can also here cover image recognition, so you can learn about convolutional neural networks to classify images. You can also learn about sentiment analysis or develop projects related to sentiment analysis or NLP or natural language processing. You can also have some examples related to finance and the banking sectors, such as fraud detection. Here, I'll give you example as well of recommendation engine, similar to Netflix recommendation engine, for example, and Amazon, of course, recommendation engine. And then finally covering time series analysis, such as predicting stock prices or weather patterns, which is again, a really powerful and very good answer. And this is kind of the advice as well that I give to my students if they would like to build their portfolio, have some examples on regression, classification, kind of tabular, basically data set, and then shift into image recognition. and then have some examples or NLP, some examples in the finance and banking sectors, and then time series analysis and recommendation engine. Very, very good answer. Okay, the next question is, well, what are maybe the best tools if you'd like to do data visualization or perform web scraping in Python? So simply, instead of asking Google, you can just say, what are the best tools to do that? If you just press enter, ChatGPT is going to reply back. It's going to tell you, well, these are the most widely used or famous data visualization libraries in Python. And this is, again, a very good answer. So overall, here we have Matplotlib, Seaborn, Plotly, and Bokeh. We also, for web scraping, we have Beautiful Soup. We have Selenium as well, and requests. And these, again, are very, very good. It's a very good answer by ChatGPT. Well, what if you maybe would like to, for example, download a specific library in a Jupyter Notebook? For example, let's assume that you're interested in this first library here, which is Beautiful Soup, and you would like to learn how to download this library. Well, I can go ahead and say, how can I download the Beautiful Soup in a Jupyter Notebook? And here we go. Basically, ChatGPT is going to tell you, well, you can need to do pip install Beautiful Soup 4. And here it's going to tell you how to import that library afterwards. So you're going to say from BS4 import Beautiful Soup. And this is actually, again, a very good answer. What I really like as well about ChatGPT and all the generative AI models, kind of explaining to you as well, what do you need to do and why do you need it? So here it's telling you, for example, after you install the library, here you need to import Beautiful Soup. And then that will allow you to use Beautiful Soup to parse HTML and XML documents and extract data from them as well. Okay, and then finally, what if, for example, I would like to leverage some libraries to access services available on AWS or Amazon Web Services? Well, I can go ahead and say which library I should use to access AWS services with Python from a Jupyter Notebook. And please note that these are basically like real-world examples that I encountered as well on a daily basis. For example, here I would like to access maybe AWS from a Jupyter Notebook. So here ChatGPT is telling you that you need to install Borrow 3, which is basically the software development kit or SDK for Python. And it's telling you here you need to do pip install Borrow 3. And then afterwards, here you need to configure your AWS credentials. And then afterwards, you need to simply access services such as S3, for example, and it's giving you a sample code. You can, of course, easily just say copy code. And it's, again, really powerful tool. And you can use it, as I mentioned, to develop a study plan and find the best resources as well. That's it. That's all I have for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it and see you in the next lesson. ChatGPT and GPT-4 can help you generate code for you and offer advice on how to design a solution to a given problem. Let's test out ChatGPT's ability to write Python, JavaScript, C, C++, MATLAB, and many more. Hello everyone, and welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we will learn how to leverage ChatGPT to perform code generation and design. So let's start with a basic example. Let's assume that I would like to define a Python function that is going to add two variables together. So basically, all I'm going to say, please define a Python function that can add up two variables. And then I'm going to say, I would like to call that function and send it the following arguments. These are going to be 10 and 5. And if you press enter, basically what you see here is a pretty powerful code along with the explanation to that code as well. Basically, it's telling you that here is an example, Python function, def, add x and y, and then the function going to return x plus y. And then here, basically, ChatGPT understood that I would like to send that function or call that function and send it arguments. These are 10 and 5. And then here you basically just perform the function call. So you call the function with its name, you send it these arguments, and then you obtain the results at the end. And it's also explaining to you that this will output 15, which is the result of adding 10 and 5. Pretty good. And another point as well is basically what's happening behind the scenes for ChatGPT. It's not simply memorization. It doesn't just memorize that adding a function or defining a function that add two numbers. It's just going to be add x and y. Basically, here I'm specifying specific arguments to send it to the function. So now to understand that these arguments need to be specified here in the function call. And also it understood that I would like to add them together as well. So it performed the math operations behind the scenes and generated the output, which is 15. Okay. All right. So what I could do as well is I can also ask ChatGPT to define a Python function that can add up two variables together. And I would like to also test that function using the numbers 10 and 5. But what I would like to do right now is I would like to achieve basically the same results using the shortest lines of code. So here, this is the only addition that I added here compared to the previous prompt. So if you press enter, here we go. Here it's going to tell you this is a simple function, which is basically called add numbers. And basically you can just call that function and send it 10 and 5. What you notice is that basically this code is pretty much the same as the previous code. So I'm going to say, well, I don't like that answer. For example, I don't like this answer. Any other suggestions? And let's see. Here is telling you, well, sure. What you could do as well is that you can leverage Lambda functions instead. And if you are aware, Lambda functions, these are simply anonymous functions. They don't have a name, and it's just so efficient, especially for very simple operations such as addition. You can just write the entire function in just one line of code. So you can also see the function call as well. So here you call the function, which is add numbers, you send it 10 and 5, and then you get the results. And basically you can just do that in a single line of code, which is pretty good. Okay. Next, I would like to, for example, expand on that code so I can get the two numbers from the user instead of just using predefined variables or values that are 10 and 5. Well, I can just say, please expand on this code so I can get two numbers from the user instead of using 10 and 5. And here we go, certainly. And here, what you notice is basically ChatGPT has developed a code for you that can show you here that we are asking the user to enter two numbers. So here I'm asking the user to enter the first number. And here you will notice that we are doing type casting to cast the input, which is going to be in a string data type, to a float data type or floating point. And that's going to be num1 and num2. And here we're calling the function with num1 and num2 and also printing out the results, which is pretty amazing. Okay, well, what I'm going to do next is I would like to maybe generate a Python function to find the largest number in an array. So if you say, let's go ahead, generate a Python function for us, and here we go, you will find that basically here the function, we call it basically find largest number. And here you're just checking and looping through the array to find the maximum number in the array, which is pretty powerful. Well, what I would like to do next is I would like to basically test the ChatGPT capabilities in maybe a different programming language. For example, maybe I would like to see if it knows MATLAB. So I'm going to say, well, can you convert this code for me, from Python to MATLAB? And here we go. It's going to tell you, well, you can certainly do this. And this is the code, basically using M scripts in MATLAB. And of course, you can copy the code here. And it's actually pretty reasonable. And it's telling you that you can simply use that code to obtain the largest number in an array. And here's an example as well to test that function and simply obtain the maximum number, which is 9. And it's also showing you the explanation as well to that code, which is pretty amazing. Okay, what you could also do is that you can use ChatGPT to, let's say, generate specific numbers, for example, in a pandas data frame table. So what I could do is I can say, could you please write a Python function for me that defines a pandas data frame table for 10 bank customers. And here I'm specifying the headers as well for the table. So I'm going to say I need the name, age, net worth, and credit card balance. So if you press enter, here we go, it's going to tell you certainly. And here define a function, they call it create customer data frame. And it's also generating names as well for the customers. So again, pretty incredible. You can see, specify that here I specified only 10 customers. So these are the names, John, Jane, Bob, Alice. Here you can also see the ages as well associated with them. You can also see the net worth too. And you can also see the credit card balance as well, okay? And here it's basically showing you the function call, so how to call that function, and showing you the output as well that is coming out from calling that function. Okay, what if I would like maybe to write a program in Python to count the number of vowels in a given string? Well, I can go ahead and do that. And please note that up until this moment, I'm just testing ChatGPT capability to write Python code and also MATLAB or M scripts. And then next, I'm going to show you basically if it knows Swift, maybe C++ and JavaScript as well. So here we go. It's going to tell you, well, sure, certainly. So it's basically defined a function. They call it count vowels here. And it looks like it's basically looping over the string, counting the number of vowels. And here, this is the function call, and it's showing you as well an example. And it's showing you the number is going to be 3 here, which is the number of vowels in hello world. Again, really powerful. Okay, let's go ahead and test ChatGPT capability in writing Swift code. So I'm going to say, generate a Swift program to maybe find the factorial of a given number. So let's go ahead and test it out. And here we go. So here, this is simply the function that is going to obtain the factorial for you. And it looks like it worked. And it's also explaining to you the code. And here it's telling you as well, when you test that basically code, the factorial of 5 is 120. And it's showing you that the factorial of 5 is simply 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, which is again pretty accurate. Well, what if I would like maybe to generate a C++ program to implement a binary search algorithm? I can say that. So I can say generate a C++ program to do this. So basically, if you press enter, here we go. This is again another completely different programming language. So this is a C basically code. And go. It's simply showing you the entire code. And of course, you can go ahead and copy that code if you like. And it's explaining to you basically how binary search works and how this function works in general. And then finally, I would like to test ChatGPT capability to generate a JavaScript function to maybe remove all duplicates from a given array. So let's go ahead and test it out. So we're going to say generate a JavaScript for me to remove all duplicates from a given array. Here we go. This is the name of the function, remove duplicates. And here it's simply just checking out if we have duplicates in that array, testing it out as well, and showing you an explanation as well to the code. Again, this is pretty incredible. Basically, what we have done is we tested ChatGPT capability to write Swift code, C++, Python, JavaScript, and also generate random values as well in a pandas data frame, or kind of generate tables for you, which is again pretty amazing. So that's it. That's all I have for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you in the next lesson. Instead of using Stack Overflow, programmers can copy the error message, and ChatGPT and GPT-4 can help provide answers and solutions for you. Let me show you what I mean. Hello everyone, and welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we will learn how to leverage ChatGPT to perform code debugging. This lesson is one of my favorites because it's going to truly show you how useful that technology is and how powerful it is as well. You can basically use it to discover what's wrong with your code. You can also use it to fix your code as well for you. So let me show you an example. Let's assume that we have a Python function that adds two numbers together. It's a pretty simple one. And basically, what I'm going to say here, I'm going to say what is wrong with this Python function in one sentence. So basically, if you are familiar with Python, you would notice that here I don't have a colon. This is a colon here missing in the definition of that. And that's why you are basically seeing here an error message. So if you press enter, here we go. Basically, I tell you, well, the function is missing a colon, the function header. So you can basically just simply say, can you fix this function for me? And here we go. Pretty incredible. So I'm going to tell you, well, here is the correct function. So simply here, it added the colon at the end. And also you will notice that there is an indentation here or white space that has been added as well. And that's simply a proper function. You can just go ahead, copy that code, and you can simply use it in your code. Okay, next. What if I, for example, was running a code in a Jupyter notebook and maybe I got an error message? So for example, here, all I could do is I can say, well, I got this error message. Let me remove the number here. So I got this error message when I run my Python code, and this is simply the error message that I got, for example. And I just want to know what's wrong with it. So if you press enter, it's going to tell you, well, this error message indicates that there is a syntax error. And basically, the reason is because my sum at the end is missing a colon at the end as part of the definition of that function. And here it's also showing you the fix to that function as well. And it's going to tell you, make sure to include a colon after the function parameters and to indent the code as well inside the function body. Pretty amazing. Okay. All right. So what if you maybe obtained another error, for example, that is related to the previous function? For example, let's assume that you tried to call the function, which is my sum function. But here, what you did is that instead of sending two arguments, basically this function is expecting x and y, here you just say, call my sum, which is that function, which is my sum here, and you just sent it one argument only, which is just 10. And simply, if you do that, you will get this error message. And let's go ahead and test it out. Basically, I'm saying, what is wrong with that Python code? And here, I'm just copying the exact same code that I got when I ran or tried to run this line of code. Here we go. This is going to tell you, well, the error message here suggests that my sum function was called with one only argument instead of the expected two arguments. And here is an example of how to fix that code. Here is going to tell you, well, to call that function, you need to send it actually two arguments. These are going to be 10 and 20. And what you notice here is that ChatGPT actually used one of the numbers that we already included as part of our error message. It's actually pretty smart. So we're going to say 10 here. And then it basically added an additional parameter, which is 20. And it's going to tell you, make sure to provide both x and y arguments to the mySum function when you call it. Okay, pretty incredible because, again, first, the explanation is on point. It's described in plain English with examples, along with the correct code as well. Okay, so the next question is, let's assume that I would like to ask ChatGPT, okay, which is, why is my loop not executing as many times as expected? So, well, here we go. There could be several reasons why the loop or for loop or while loop is not executing as expected. Telling you, well, the loop condition is not maybe written correctly. The loop is exiting early, for example. The loop is not actually being executed, or maybe the loop variable is not being updated correctly. Okay, so these are various reasons. Another example, well, can you maybe identify any logic errors in my code? So I can just say that. So if I say, can you identify any logic error in my code? And he's going to tell you, well, it's difficult to identify the logic code, basically in the because without seeing the code, but it's going to show you basically what are the key, I would say, logic errors that are available out there. These are off by one errors, or maybe incorrect conditionals, for example. Maybe there is division by zero that might cause some issues, or incorrect variable scope. Okay. Another, for example, question that you can ask ChatGPT is, well, can you maybe tell me what are the 10 common programming errors for maybe new Python programmers? So that basically can show you the 10 programming errors. And one of them is first syntax error, such as missing a colon at the end of a Python function, as an example. We have also indentation errors, and these are the first two errors that we actually encountered before. You also have name error. You're referencing a variable or a function, basically that hasn't been defined before. We also have type error as well. Maybe you have, for example, infinite loops. You are stuck in an infinite loop that doesn't exit. You can also have maybe division by zero as well, or maybe incorrect file handling and inefficient code. Again, pretty amazing. So what I could do as well is I can say maybe, okay, what about maybe JavaScript, for example? So let's say I would like to know what issues are available in, let's say, JavaScript. So I'm going to tell you one. Certainly. One of them is syntax error, undefined variables, null or undefined errors, for example, here. You can also see infinite loops, division by zero. It's pretty much common as well across both languages. All right, next, let me show you a little bit of an advanced example. And basically here I have a Jupyter notebook that solves regression type problems in data science. And basically without going through all the details, I just want to give you from a very high level what that function, what that code does first. And I'm going to show you where I introduced an error. And I want to see if ChatGPT is able to detect that issue for us and even fix the code, which is, again, when I saw this, it was pretty much like mind-blowing for me. So for example, first, I'm going to import all our key libraries. These are Seaborn, Pandas, Matplotlib, NumPy. And then here we used Pandas to read our data, the CSV file, which is university admission data. And then we explored all the different columns here. We checked out the shape as well. And then we confirmed if we have missing values in my data or not. Next, basically, I'm going to perform EDA, or exploratory data analysis and visualization. So here we're going to use or plot histograms, and then afterwards here I just plotted scatter plots to visualize the data. No issues, no problems here so far. And then what I've done here is simply I split the data to inputs and outputs. The inputs, we're going to call them X. The output, and that is going to be my target variable that I'm trying to predict, which is simply the chances of admission here, which is Y. And basically what I've done here is, as part of this practice opportunity, basically I generally ask students to split the data into training and testing. So here we are missing an actual part of the code, which is critical because I'm going to use the xtrain and xtest to train the model and test the model afterwards. So basically here, without this section, there is an issue here, there is an error or problem. There is a missing lines of code here that students need to fill. And basically here I have the xtrain. Here I'm basically using XGBoost regressor to train my model. And I need xtrain here to train the model, and then I need here to test the model with xtest, but I don't have that. What I've done is I simply copied that code here, okay, without, of course, a solution at the end. And I just came back, and I just would like to see if ChatGPT was able to basically detect the error for us. And let's go ahead and copy the code. So here I'm going to say Control V. So this is, again, the exact same code that I've got here, okay, that I showed you in the Jupyter notebook. So here again, I'm reading my data, I'm checking it out. And the part here is I have X and Y, and I do not have X train and Y train. I just went ahead and trained the model, assuming that I know X train and Y train. So let's go ahead and test it out and see if it detected it. And here we go. The code is missing the definition of X train and X test and Y test variables as well. And assuming that these variables have been defined and split the data correctly, and here we go. What you see is, which is pretty, again, amazing. You will find that simply here, it also already detected that I need to perform train test split here to split my data, which is X and Y, to simply X train, X test, Y train, and Y test, which is, again, kind of mind-blowing for me, because right now you can simply use ChatGPT to detect error messages for you. You can also use it to fix the code as well. And that's it. That's simply all I have for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you in the next lesson. ChatGPT and GPT-4 can help optimize code for speed and efficiency. Let me show you a few examples. Hello everyone, and welcome to this lesson on code optimization with ChatGPT. First, I would like to ask ChatGPT to give me tips on how to optimize, let's say, my Python code. So let me show you. First, I'm going to say, please give me some tips on how to optimize my Python code. And what you see here is basically ChatGPT is recommending various ways to optimize the code. First, use built-in functions and libraries. And then you can also use list comprehension, for example. So instead of defining a for loop and maybe add, for example, an accumulator in there, instead what you could do is that you can just use list comprehension to do the exact same code in just one single line instead. And it's also showing you examples here, which is pretty powerful. And then you can also use, kind of avoid using global variables. You can use efficient data structures. You can use generators. You can also use the in operators. Again, it's pretty amazing, really powerful, very good tips, along with examples associated with them. Okay, what if I would like maybe to provide ChatGPT with a sample code and trying to optimize it? For example, this is again a very simple example. I'm going to say, can you optimize this Python code for me? And here I simply have a function that just sums up two numbers together. You press enter, I'm going to tell you, well, the code you provided is already quite simple and optimized, but what you could do is that you can add maybe a few suggestions. First, you can use type hints. Basically, you can add type hints to the function definition, and that can help improve the performance and readability. So basically, kind of ChatGPT has been able to rewrite the code for you here in a way and added that simply type hints in there. And also showed you another suggestion, which is using lambda function instead. So instead of using or defining the regular regular Python functions and actually call that function, here we're using lambda function instead. And that is, again, we're going to generate an optimized or a more efficient code in one single line of code. And then here it's showing you use the plus operator directly. So instead of defining a function, just perform addition and then calling that function, you can just simply just say result equals to x plus y and call it a day. Okay. What you could do as well is you can say, well, could you please maybe give me a better answer as an example? Let's see maybe if ChatGPT has any additional ideas. So we're going to tell you, well, apologies for the previous answer. Since the provided code is really quite simple, I can be optimized further. However, here are some general tips on optimizing code. And here again is telling you pretty much the same, I would say, answer again, but maybe added additional tips associated with it. For example, using unnecessary calculations as an example, and so on. Okay. So what I would like to do next is I would like to perform code optimization as well, but maybe to a little bit more advanced code. So if you recall, we covered this before when we trained our machine learning regression model. Let me copy the code first, and then I'm going to show you what do I mean by that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to first ask ChatGPT to simply explain what this code is going to do. I'm going to say, what did this code do? And here I copied basically a list of code. And if you recall, this is the exact same code that I covered before when we trained our machine learning regression model, and we intentionally removed the X-train and X-test part. So if I just press enter, what you see here is simply an explanation of the code. So ChatGPT is going to explain it first, and then when I'm going to ask it afterwards to simply go ahead and optimize it. So let's wait and see. So here we go. What you see here is basically the code performs the following tasks. First, going to import necessary libraries. So we're going to import Seaborn, Pandas, Matplotlib, NumPy, and XGBoost, which is pretty accurate. And then we're going to read the CSV file here using Pandas read CSV function. And then we're going to display the first 6 rows, last 6 rows, and then perform feature or display the feature columns next. And then the code checks the shape of the data, right? And then we check if we have any missing values in the data using the isNull function. We also display the heat map using Seaborn. We displayed histogram as well. And then we display the pair plot using Seaborn to visualize the relationship. Again, pretty incredible because this is exactly what the code actually performed. And then we plot scatter plot afterwards. And then we split the data into the predictor X and target variable Y. And then we reshape the target variable. And then we split the data into training and testing. And this is actually was missing part from the actual code, but this is kind of the assumption. Based ChatGPT assumed that we need this step and added it here. And then we define an XGBoost regressor model, train the model, and then predict the target variable. And then finally calculate the various regression metrics and display the evaluation metrics as well. So this is just simple code explanation. So what I could do here is I can say, well, could you please maybe optimize it for me? Can you optimize that code? Let's see what we're going to get. Here, it's going to tell you several suggestions to try to optimize the code. For example, it's going to tell you, well, you can use a display instead of print, for example, in display function. Here, it's going to tell you, well, you need to scale, for example, the data before splitting. Another recommendation is, well, you can also use grid search CV as an example to perform hyperparameters tuning and optimization, which is pretty incredible because, well, this is actually a correct statement because what we have done so far is we actually have been able to train our machine learning regression model, which is XGBoost regressor, but we haven't optimized the model parameter, which is a key step that we do here. And this is, again, a very solid, good recommendation as well. Okay. And simply here, basically, ChatGPT kind of start to recommend as well kind of the improvements. So if you scroll down, you will see that based because of the limitation of the output size, you will see that the code kind of stopped here in a way. But basically, you will see some of the implementation, some of the recommendations have been implemented here. So for example, from IPython display, import display, this has been included. That wasn't included in my original code. Okay, so what I would like to do as well is sometimes when we write any code, we would like to reduce the memory usage for that code. So what you could do is that you can say, well, can you, for example, reduce the memory usage of the code? Please note that, again, ChatGPT is quite smart. It actually kind of remembers what we have done in the previous task. So I'm talking about the exact same code. And here we go. It's going to tell you, well, you can use these techniques. You can use the type parameter, for example. When reading the CSV file, you can specify the data type of each column. So basically, instead of maybe using, let's say, float, maybe data type, which might include or consume a large amount in memory, you can simply specify the data type before, so that is going to improve your memory usage. You can also use the as type method to simply convert from one data type to another, which is pretty good as well. You can delete unnecessary variables as well. And you can use generators. And here we go, scaling you, well, here is the optimized version of that code. So what you see here is basically specifying the data type for each of the columns available in the actual CSV file. So again, super accurate, pretty incredible. So basically, instead of using the same data type for the entire pandas data frame, here we can simply optimize it to optimize our memory usage. And that's pretty much it for this prompt. What I'm going to do next is, well, sometimes I would like to remove any repeated computations. So I'm going to ask ChatGPT to simply detect if we have repeated computations in our code or not. So I'm going to say, are there any repeated computations that can be avoided? Can I tell you, well, yes, there are some repeated computations in your current code. I'm going to tell you, well, avoid computing y twice. So basically, I did the y computation here twice. And avoid computing scaling object twice. So here, the scaling object for y is computed twice as well. And it's going to tell you, well, here is the optimized code without basically these tasks. It's going to remove these operations for you. Again, pretty incredible if you'd like to do memory optimization, if you'd like to remove any repeated part of the code. What I would like to do next is I would like to see if we can parallelize that code. So I'm going to say, well, can you basically parallelize that code to improve performance? Well, let's go ahead and check it out. And it's going to tell you, well, one way to parallelize that code is to use, for example, joblib library. And that is going to simply perform parallel computations for you. And here it's going to tell you, well, when you perform, actually here another example too, is going to tell you can use scatterplot when you parallelize the loop that generates a scatterplot for each feature. And you can also, when you perform hyperparameters tuning and optimization, you can perform parallelization to that process as well. And it's going to tell you, well, here we go. This is a sample code. And if you check it out, you can see, for example, here, this is the parallel part. Okay, if you'd like to parallelize some of the tasks, such as plotting, for example, scatter plots, so instead of using that for loop and doing that operation over and over again, you can just do all the entire operations in parallel. You can also see, because we don't have hyperparameter optimization and tuning, you will see that basically the code here stopped pretty much. Okay. And then sometimes you would like to improve the runtime of a given code. So I can say, could you please improve the runtime for this code? And it's going to give you a few suggestions. Well, you can use a more efficient algorithm. So instead of using XGBoost, you can maybe use a simpler algorithm, maybe support vector machines or maybe random forest, for example. I'm going to tell you, well, you can use feature selection techniques, actually pretty accurate. So instead of using all the features and feeding them all to the model, instead, you can use maybe principal component analysis to do that, to simply reduce the number of features that you got in your data. You can use a subset of the data. So instead of using the entire data set, you can just use a sample of that. You can optimize hyperparameters. You can use parallel computing. You can also use GPUs, for example, like hardware accelerators as an example. And you can also optimize your code by removing unnecessary computations or using efficient data structures. Again, pretty incredible suggestions. And then finally, and this is kind of the fun part here, basically what I'm going to do here is I'm going to ask the ChatGPT to simply apply one of the recommendations that they basically offered, which is, we'd like to optimize hyperparameters and kind of experiment with different hyperparameters for the machine learning model or the machine learning algorithm to try to give me a better performance. And here we go. So what I'm going to do here, what you see is, well, yes, you can optimize hyperparameters to find the best combinations using grid search CV. And here we go. Well, you see, basically the code is going to be written for you. So we're going to show you here we're going to read the data. We're going to specify the data type for each column. We're going to split the data. We're going to do the scaling of that data. And then this is kind of the fun part. This is quite new. So we haven't had that in our original code. And basically ChatGPT was able to define hyperparameters for the XGBoost model for you. And basically here running or training the model with the grid search CV and basically generating all the different predictions, which is again, pretty incredible, pretty powerful. And that's it. That's all I have for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it and see you in the next lesson. ChatGPT and GPT-4 can provide feedback on coding style, structure, and potential coding issues. Let me show you a few examples. Hello everyone, and welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we will learn how to leverage ChatGPT to perform code reviews. I can simply ask ChatGPT to tell me what does it think of a given code in one paragraph. Let me show you. Here, I just picked a very simple function, which is the function called mySum. This function simply sums up x and y arguments and just returns basically the sum value. And here I'm just performing function call, calling that function, sending it arguments, which is 5 and 10. If I just say, what do you think of this code in one paragraph? Well, I tell you, well, this code defines a function, call it mySum. This function is going to take in two arguments, x and y. It's going to add them, return back z. The function then returns the value of z. The code then calls the mySum function with arguments. The function is executed. And then it's going to tell you, therefore, the code simply computes a sum of 5 and 10 using mySum function, and then does nothing with the result. Okay, what I could do as well next is, well, I can ask ChatGPT, what do you think of this code, but in detail? And here we go. This code defines the functions, pretty much the same explanation, but here, basically ChatGPT added an additional improvement. I tell you, well, one potential improvement to this code could be to assign the results of the function to a variable so that it can be used later in the program. And this is basically, so when you call this function, here is the result need to be put in another variable, call it result. And here it's just giving you an additional modification or kind of feedback based on the code you provide. What I could do as well is I can say any other recommendations and press enter, and let's see. Yes, there are a few more recommendations as well that could be made. One of them is adding doc strings, so adding documentation basically to the function. Use descriptive variables names. So instead of using x and y, you can actually use more variable names that make the code a little bit more readable. You can also consider adding error handling as well. So for example, in this case, if the function is called with arguments that are not numbers, it will raise a type error as an example. So you will see the code here has been updated to include or consider the error handling. Okay, so overall, the original code was simple and functional. These changes would make the code more robust, easier to understand, and more reusable. Okay, what I could do next is I would like to ask ChatGPT to check whether we have potential security vulnerabilities in our code or not. And for that case, I'm going to basically include a little bit more advanced code. Let me show you what do I mean by this. So if you recall, this code is the same code that we used before. And here I'm asking ChatGPT, are there any potential security vulnerabilities in the code? Does it handle error, for example, and exceptions appropriately? This is the exact same code that I showed you earlier that basically just reads the data and just train a machine learning regression model to predict our chances of university admission. And at the end, it shows calculate all the different metrics, basically, and print them to the screen. If you press enter, and I tell you, well, there don't appear to be any major security vulnerabilities in this code since it's just reading data from a CSV file, plotting graphs, and training machine learning model. However, there are a few things to note regarding error handling and exceptions. It's telling you, well, there is commented out code that scales the input and output data. If you recall, we had the standard scaler has been commented out. Here we also telling you the code does not handle missing values in a robust way. The code does not include any exception handling for the XGBoost model as an example. Again, pretty powerful, really useful tool that you can leverage. And basically just all you need to do, use the exact same prompt. And instead of pasting my code, you can just include your code in there. All right, so what I could ask ChatGPT next is basically, does a given code follow coding best practices and standards or not? And I can also ask whether the code is readable, maintainable, and efficient. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to say, does the code follow coding best practices and standards? Is it readable, maintainable, and efficient? And of course, here I'm referring to the code basically that I had in the previous prompt. And here it's going to tell you, well, the code appears to follow some coding best practices and standards, which is great. It includes comments to describe what each section includes. And also the code also follows the PEP8 style, which is simply a styling guide for Python code. And you can see, however, there are some few areas of improvement. For example, there are several commented out sections of the code. So if you recall, we had some section with the scaling part. This has been commented out. that could be removed to improve clarity and reduce clutter. That's a good point. The second point, there are several lines of code that are not indented properly. So this makes the code harder to read, okay? So basically it's an incredible tool that you can simply use as some sort of like a coding buddy or a guide or a guidance, basically. And then here's three, the code could be more efficient in some places. For example, here, making recommendation to the seaborne heat map as an example. And then finally, there is a lot of code in a single cell. Basically, ChatGPT is recommending that you break that code or split it into separate cells to make it more readable. Okay. What I could ask next is, well, does this code contain any inconsistencies? I'm gonna tell you, well, I cannot determine if the code contain any inconsistencies. Please provide the code so that I can review it. So basically what I need to do right now, I need to copy the code again. So let me do that. So I'm going to paste it here, and then I'm going to ask the same question. Basically, does this code contain any inconsistencies? Okay, let's go ahead and test it out. I'm going to tell you, well, the code does not contain any syntax error or obvious inconsistencies. However, there are a few areas for improvement. The comments, okay, the comments could be more consistent in terms of capitalization and punctuations. The variable names are mostly consistent, but there are a few places where they are inconsistent. For example, the input and output data are stored in uppercase variables X and Y, while the data frame is stored in lowercase university_df. It's a good point. Basically, we need to incorporate that in our code. The commented out code scaling input, the and the output could be removed to improve clarity and, of course, remove clutter as well. The scatterplot loop could be more clear by including an indentation as well for the sns.scatterplot. And there are no comments or explanation for the machine learning model, training and evaluation. This could be helpful if you would like to share that code with other people. Okay, pretty powerful suggestions. Next, I can basically ask whether if we have compatibility issues or dependencies that could affect the code functionality. So I can simply ask that question. And I'm going to tell you, well, there are potential compatibility issues. And if you recall, because we are using other libraries such as Seaborn, Pandas, Matplotlib, NumPy, and XGBoost, of course, these libraries, if they are not installed properly or if they are not compatible, for example, with our version of Python, this could cause issues. This is a good point. The code uses Python 3 syntax, so it may not be compatible with other older version, for example, with Python 2.7. The code relies on the CSV file, University Admission CSV, being present in the working directory. If the file is missing, of course, the code is not going to work. The machine learning code relies on having a training data set, X-train and Y-train, and the testing data set as well. And if these data sets are missing, then, or any modification happened to them, the code will not going to work. And then finally, the code relies on having enough memory available to load the data set and train the machine learning model. Again, pretty amazing, really powerful feedback. Okay. Next, I can also ask ChatGPT whether we have performance or bottleneck issues in our code. So let's go ahead and ask. So I'm going to tell you, well, there are several potential performance issues. One, the code loads the entire CSV file into memory with using pandas, of course. And this could simply might be slow and memory intensive for a large data set. The code also includes several visualization using Seaborn and Matplotlib. Also, the code trains an XGBoost model, regressor model, which can be very computationally expensive. And the code does not include any parallelization or optimization techniques, for example. So BASIC's recommending that when you train XGBoost algorithm, maybe you need to improve the performance by running it on a multi-core processors or distributed computing systems. And then finally, the code does not include any error handling or exception handling or for memory or performance issues as well. Okay, next, I can simply ask ChatGPT what are the code convention for Python, and then it's going to tell you, well, there is some coding basically conventions. One of them is what we call it PEP 8 or Python Enhancement Proposal 8. And basically this is a standard, widely known standard that can kind of set the style for Python to ensure a consistent, readable, and easy to maintain code. Basically, I tell you, these are kind of the key conventions when it comes to indentation, line length, naming convention, comments, and so on. So what I could do is I can say, well, does this code adhere to PEP 8 style guide for Python code? And It's going to tell you, well, overall, the code appears to adhere to the PAP style, which is great. Here are some specific examples. Indentation, it's going to tell you the code uses 4 spaces for indentation. Line length, naming convention, comments, import statements. And again, this is pretty incredible. And that's it. That's simply all I have for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it and see you in the next lesson. ChatGPT and GPT-4 can help programmers introduce new features to their code. Let me show you a few examples. Hello everyone and welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we will learn how to leverage ChatGPT to introduce new features to our code. This is one of my favorite, capabilities that ChatGPT can do. Let me show you a few examples. Let's assume that I have a simple Python function that is basically sums up 2 values together. The functions call it mySum, takes x and y, and just sums up x plus y, returns back z. So what I could do here is I can say, could you please rewrite this function? And let me show you what do I mean by this. I'm going to say rewrite the following function so it can perform 2 additional features. So this is my original function, and I would like to basically expand upon this function to allow it to take input from the user and also perform multiplication and addition. So not just addition here, I would like the function to perform multiplication as well. And here we go. If you press enter, it's going to tell you here is the modified function. So first, the function was able to simply take inputs from the user. So we're using the input here function to get the first number and the second number. And you can see that basically the function right now was able to perform addition and multiplication as well. And also ChatGPT is quite smart. Actually, basically changed the name as well of the function. It's going to call it mySum multiplication instead of just mySum. Pretty amazing. Okay. What I could do is I can say, well, what if I would like maybe to add division on top of that? So I can say copy, and here I'm pasting, add another feature to perform division. And here we go. So now I have mySum multiplication and division. And here I'm going to take x and y from the user. And then I'm going to sum, multiply, and divide. And then I'm going to call the function and basically print out the sum, multiplication, and division. Okay? Again, pretty powerful. What if I would like maybe, for example, that I would like to maybe add a new feature to the code, but I don't know what that feature is. Maybe I would like to just ask ChatGPT to maybe take that code to the next level. Let's see what's going to happen here. So I'm going to say add a new feature to the code to make it next level. Let's see what's going to happen. I tell you, well, sure. Here is a modified version, basically, of the function that includes a new feature that allows the user to choose the operation they want to perform. So instead of simply every time calculating or performing the addition, multiplication, and division, now ChatGPT recommended that the user is also going to enter the type of operation that they would like to perform. And then based on that operation, whether it's summation, multiplication, or division, basically the results is going to be displayed. Again, pretty incredible. And of course, as always, ChatGPT is explaining to you exactly what each step of that code performs. And what I could do next is I can add a new feature to the code by trying to make it accept multiple inputs instead of just 2. Let me show you. So what we see here is basically before we had simply 2 inputs, which is x and y. Now I would like to allow the code to take more than 2 inputs. And here we go. So here we go. ChatGPT generated a modified version of the function. And this function right now can accept multiple input values and allow the user to choose the operation that they would like to perform. What you notice here is basically we are stuck in a while loop, so while true, and every time we're just getting data from the user. And we're going to quit if the user enter value of q. So basically if num equals to q, please go ahead and break. And here we're checking that we have at least 2 numbers that are required. And here we're getting what type of operation basically that we need to perform, whether it's addition, multiplication, or division. And basically just doing the operation here and printing out the results and testing the function at the end. Okay, again, pretty incredible. What I could do is I can maybe add a feature to store and retrieve previous input and output values, maybe for future reference. So here we go. So I'm going to say, could you please add a new feature to my code to basically obtain or kind of keep track of the previous values. And here we go. So we'll find that there is previous calculations, and let's put a list. and there is some sort of an append here somewhere to that list to basically keep track of the entire operations that we have done in the past. Okay, next, what if I would like maybe to add another feature to convert the input values to a different base? Maybe it's a binary or maybe hexadecimal, for example. Let's go ahead and test it out. So if I say, what about adding a feature to convert the input to a different base? And here we go. It's going to tell you, well, here is a modified version of the code. And this is simply a modified version of the code to do that conversion of the base. So you can see here, there is different base. There is like hexadecimal one. There is the binary one as well. And you can see this is simply just this section in the code has been added to our previous code to do that enhanced feature for us. All right, so what if I would like to add a new feature to the code to allow it to accept a Python list instead? So I'm going to say add a new feature to the code to allow it to accept a Python list. And let's see, and here we go. Basically what you notice right now is we're going to have a lot more, I would say, advanced code compared to the original Python function, which is only 4 lines that we got before. And this is simply the code here that can accept a Python list, and it can simply perform all the operations for us. And you will notice as well that here the base has been incorporated as well. It's kind of building upon the previous features that ChatGPT has built in the previous prompts for us. And again, right now we have a much longer code, and you don't have to do anything pretty much. You can simply copy that code, and you can go ahead and modify it, of course, for your liking. Okay. What I would like to do next is I would like to say, can you add a feature to display a graph or chart of the input values and their calculated output? Let's go ahead and see that. So sure, here is a modified version, and it's telling you that I'm going to use matplotlib library to do that for us. And you can simply see here that I'm going to use matplotlib somewhere to simply plot or display the graph or chart for the input values along with the calculations as well. So again, it's using the previous code that we got before and kind of building upon it to include the data visualization piece. Let's see if that implemented somewhere. So if you scroll down, again, it's still generating the exact same code that we got before. And it's going to tell you here, this is a modified version of the function. The matplotlib library is imported at the beginning. You can see the matplotlib library here has been imported. And I'm just looking for the section where matplotlib has been utilized. So here we go. So you'll find that there is a plot here. So this is a section where it actually plot the results for the input and the output values as well. Okay. What if I would like maybe to improve upon a machine learning model that we already have? This is kind of one of my favorites, and that's when I said, like, this is pretty incredible. For example, what if I say, which machine learning algorithm does a given code implement? And I'm going to copy the code, and let me show you what do I mean. So I'm going to say, so here I have a machine learning regression, basically, model that implements XGBoost. We have used that before in previous lessons. And here I'm going to say, which machine learning algorithm does this code implement? So it's going to tell you, well, this code uses supervised regression machine learning algorithm, known as XGBoost algorithm, to train a model and make predictions. Okay. What if I would like maybe to say, can you recommend 3 different machine learning algorithms that might improve the performance? So let's go ahead and see the recommendations from ChatGPT. It's going to tell you, well, sure. And instead of XGBoost, you can use random forest. You can use gradient boosted trees or gradient boosting. And you can also use neural networks as an example to try to improve the performance. And this is kind of the incredible piece here of art, I would say. So what you could say, could you please update the code with the first machine learning algorithm you proposed? And here we go. Sure, this is an updated version of the code that uses random forest regression model. So what you notice is basically the code is exactly the same as before. And ChatGPT was able to go to the section where we're implementing XGBoost, replace that section with the proper code instead. Let's see if that worked. So basically kept the heat map, for example, the histogram, the pair plot visualization, everything is the same. We took X and Y inputs, and here we go. What you notice is now we are training a random forest regression model instead of using XGBoost algorithm, which is, again, pretty incredible, super powerful. And the final piece, which is, well, update the code to use an artificial neural network instead. And let's see. Sure, here is a modified version. So right now, instead of using basically scikit-learn library to do that for us, now we're using, I'm assuming going to use Keras here. We can, of course, specify that we'd like to use Keras or TensorFlow 2.0 to simply train an artificial neural network for us instead. Here again, we're splitting the data to inputs and outputs. And here we go. So create an artificial neural network. So basically, if you're familiar with that, we're building a neural network model to simply solve regression type problems. We are compiling the model, and then we're applying the fit method to the model. And then we're generating predictions here at the end. Pretty incredible. And please note that this is an AI, which is ChatGPT, creating or developing or recommending another AI to solve regression type problems. And of course, we are living in an incredible time right now. And that's it. That's all I have for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you in the next lesson. ChatGPT and GPT-4 can help programmers develop code testing and validation pipelines to an existing code. Let me show you what I mean by that. Hello everyone, and welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we will learn how to leverage ChatGPT to perform code testing and validation. So why don't we start by asking ChatGPT how to perform unit testing? We're going to say, how do you perform unit testing in your project, for example? And what you see is basically ChatGPT is telling you, as an AI language model, I don't have a specific project to work on. But in general, unit testing is a critical part of software development to ensure that individual components or units of code behave as expected. And it's telling you here are the common steps to perform testing. First, you need to determine the scope of the unit test. You need to write your test cases. And then you need to execute or run those test cases. Then you need to analyze the results and identify the failed tests. Then finally, repeat the process afterwards. And basically, it's kind of concluding by telling you it's essential to perform unit testing throughout the development process, as it helps catch bugs early on and improve the quality of the final project. Okay, pretty good answer. Next, what if I ask ChatGPT, what do you mean by code coverage and why it is important? Well, I'm going to tell you code coverage is a measure of how much of the source code of a software application is executed during the testing process. It's basically a metric that tells us how thoroughly our tests exercise the code and whether any portions of the code are left untested. Okay, so, and of course, there's a lot of details in here, but that's from a very high level. What do you mean by code coverage? And basically, I'm asking these questions because I'm going to ask ChatGPT to write a test case for me for a given code. And I'm going to ask it as well to confirm whether we have code coverage or not. So let's go ahead and test it out. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, could you please write a unit test case to the following code? And I'm just going to write a very simple code. Again, this is my function, my sum function that simply sums up x and y arguments and returns z. And here we go. Here's an example of a unit test case in Python for my sum function. And it's telling you basically the unit test here. And you're basically kind of testing the code using various test cases. So here you have test case for positive integers, for negative integers, for 0, and for floating point numbers as well. Okay, looks pretty good. And of course, here it's explaining to you how that unit test is actually performing. What I'm going to do as well is I'm going to say, okay, write maybe a unit test case to the following code. And here I'm selecting basically another code that includes if condition or if else statements. So here I'm going to say basically just a simple function. Let's call it compare numbers. This function is going to compare simply y versus x. It's going to return either y is greater than x and y are equal, or x is greater than y. Let's go ahead and test it out. And it's going to tell you, well, sure, here is a unit test basically for our code. And what you see here, it's basically you are testing every single branch in the if-else condition. And that's kind of the code coverage that I was referring to before. And basically, we want to make sure that every branch has been exercised, and that means you have enough code coverage. Okay, what I could do next is I can say, okay, do you have enough code coverage? And what I've done here is I simply copied this code here, and I said, okay, do we have enough code coverage here? And I basically copied the code. It's going to tell you, well, based on the provided code, we have achieved 100% statement coverage since each line of code has been executed at least once during the unit test, which is great. And what you could do, of course, you can ask ChatGPT to generate a unit test for your code. And then, of course, you need to review it. And then you can ask ChatGPT whether we have full code coverage for our testing or not. Pretty incredible. Okay, next, what if I would like to perform fault injection test and validate, for example, a specific code? Well, what I could do is what I've done here is basically I said the following. I'm going to say perform fault injection test and validate the code below. And here I simply included the code, which is my original function, along with the unit test that I included before. So ChatGPT basically mentioned that fault injection testing is a type of testing that involves deliberately introducing faults or errors into the system to see how it responds. And you will see that basically ChatGPT mentioned that to perform a fault injection test on the compare numbers function, we could introduce faults by passing invalid input values to the function and see how it responds. And basically shows you as well an example, which is again pretty incredible because now you can use ChatGPT to first write test cases for you, ensure that we have code coverage, and also insert faults to your code to ensure that your code is robust enough to these fault conditions. Okay, what I could do as well is I can, for example, measure the effectiveness of a given test case. So if I say measure the effectiveness of the unit test below, and here I simply copied the unit test that ChatGPT has generated, and of course you can go ahead and type your own here. I'm going to tell you, well, the effectiveness of unit tests can be measured by various metrics such as code coverage, number of bugs found, and time saved in the long run. And here it's kind of basically grab every single item here and kind of comment on it, which is again pretty powerful. I'm going to tell you code coverage. The provided test case covers all the code, branches, and statements in the compare numbers. Therefore, we achieve 100% statement coverage and 100% branch coverage, which is perfect. And then number of bugs found, the provided test class does not report any bugs, which may indicate that the code is relatively bug-free. And then time saved in the long run. Unit tests can help save time and effort in the long run by catching bugs early in the development cycle, reducing the amount of time and effort required to fix them later. And these are kind of the three metrics that basically ChatGPT kind of recommended to ensure that we have a proper unit test case to our code. All right, so what I would like to do next is I would like to test ChatGPT ability to write unit test cases to a little bit more complex code. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to refer to our code that we got before for the machine learning regression model, if you recall. So I'm going to say write the unit test case to the following code. And here I just copied and pasted my university admission prediction, basically code. So here basically we're exploring the data. We are checking whether we have null values or not. We are visualizing as well the data. And then we're going to split the data to inputs and outputs, X and Y. And then we're going to split the data afterwards to X train and X test, which is training and testing data set. And then we're going to train our XGBoost regressor model. And then we're going to explore the results and print out all the metrics. So if you press enter, it's going to tell you, well, here is a unit test case for the provided code. And here we go. Basically what you see here is we're testing the data loading process. And then here we're doing the testing as well for the reshaping of the array and for the exploring as well whether we have missing or null values or not. And then here we're testing the model training piece as well of our code. Okay, pretty amazing. All right, what I could do as well, if I can say, could you please maybe perform fault injection to the above code? I'm going to say, well, I'm sorry, but I can't perform fault injection as it goes against ethical and professional standards. Fault injection is a technique used to intentionally introduce faults or errors into systems and test its resilience and robustness. It's pretty interesting because it basically inserted or injected fault before to the simple code, but here for some reason it just it mentioned that it can't perform fault injection. Okay, what I could do next is I can say, well, what is a regression test as an example? I'm going to tell you, well, regression testing is a type of software testing that verifies if a previously tested functionality of a system still works as expected after introducing new changes or updates to the system. It's performed to ensure that the changes or updates to the system have not introduced any new defects or errors, and the existing functionalities of the system are still working as intended. So what I could do next, I can say, well, now I know what regression testing is. I can just simply say perform regression test to the following code. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, copy my exact same code that I got before, which is my machine learning regression, basically, code here. And you press enter. And let's see how that works. Perform regression testing on the above code. We need to execute the same test cases that were previously executed on the same code to ensure that the existing functionalities of the system are still working as intended. And then here is a sample regression test that will be executed. Test data loading, that's one of them. Test data pre-processing, test model training, and test model predictions. And here we go. Basically writing for you the regression test for that given code. And it's also explaining it to you as well, which is again, super powerful. And that's it. That's simply all I have for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it and see you in the next lesson. ChatGPT and GPT-4 can help write code documentation. Let me show you a few examples. Hello everyone and welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we will learn how to leverage ChatGPT to perform code documentation. This is one of my favorite features in ChatGPT. It's incredibly powerful. So let me go ahead and walk you through a few prompts. So first, maybe let's ask ChatGPT, what is code documentation? I'm gonna tell you, well, code documentation is the process of describing how a computer program works, including the purpose, behavior, and functions of different parts of the program. And it typically involves adding comments, explanations, and other information to the code that will help other developers understand and maintain it. And well, what I can simply ask again is, what is docstrings? I assume some of you know what docstrings is, but let's me go ahead and walk you through it as well. So docstrings are a type of documentation in programming that are used to describe the purpose, behavior, and usage of a specific function, module, or class in a code. A docstring is a string literal that is placed at the beginning of a function, module, or class definition and is enclosed in triple quotes or quotation marks. Okay, so what I'm gonna do next, I'm gonna say, okay, I'm going to copy my simple function here, and then I'm going to ask ChatGPT, does this code have docstrings? And obviously the answer is pretty straightforward, no. The code you provided does not have docstrings. And it's going to explain to you, basically a docstring is a string literal that is placed at the beginning of a function and so on. And it's telling you, well, here is an example of how you could add a docstring to the mySum function. So just without anything, basically just ChatGPT just recommended for you that, well, what you need to do from a proper documentation standpoint, that you need to add these docstrings. Again, you will see the 3 quotation marks here as well, and basically just a quick explanation of what that function does. So it's going to tell you, well, adds 2 numbers and return their sum, and it's going to tell you as well that this function takes 2 arguments, x and y, the data type of those as well, and then return the sum of the 2 input numbers. Okay, pretty incredible. Without even asking ChatGPT to write the docstring for us, here we're just basically got the answer. But what you could do as well is, well, if you basically, I've tried this before, and what happened is ChatGPT did not generate that code for us. It just explained, well, no, that code did not have docstrings. So I could do that. I can say, well, could you please add docstring to the following code? And basically ChatGPT is going to add it for you. Okay, what I could do instead is I can say, well, could you please add documentation? I'm going to make it a little bit more generic and say, can you add documentation to the following code? And here I have simply mySum function. It's going to tell you, well, here's an example of how you could add documentation to the code. Here, simply it added the docstring for us. And it's going to tell you, well, in this example, the docstring provides a brief description of what the function does, what parameters it takes, and what it returns as well. Okay. What I could do next is I can say, well, could you please add maybe comments? So instead of adding documentation, I'm going to say, could you please add comments to the following code? So what you see here is going to say, basically, ChatGPT added comments. And if you're familiar, of course, with Python programming, here you add a comment by adding a hashtag at the beginning. And you will see basic hashtag is going to tell you, well, define a function that takes 2 parameters. Here, hashtag, add these 2 parameters together, return the value of z, and then call the function afterwards. Okay. What I could do next, I can say, well, what if I maybe don't have that function and I would like to write a doc string for a function that calculates the factorial of a number. Here we go. We're going to tell you, well, here's an example. So basically, it's writing for you the actual function itself, along with the doc string or the documentation associated with it. And this is simply a function that is going to calculate the factorial for a given number. And it's also explaining to you here basically what that function does. Again, pretty incredible. Okay, what I could do next, I can say, well, could you please document a Python script that generates a plot from a data set? Pretty generic, but here we go. I'm going to tell you, well, sure. Here's an example of how you could document a Python script that generates a plot from a data set. So here, basically, you will see the doc string here, and you can see the actual code that basically generates or performs data plotting. And here we go. You see the add arguments. Here, parse the arguments. Again, basically, you will see that ChatGPT added two elements in here, added basic doc strings here, highlighted in green, and with these two quotation marks. And you can also see comments as well associated with pretty much every section or lines of code. And basically, you will see here, create a new figure and basically use matplotlib to plot X versus Y data sets. Okay. What if I would like maybe to test ChatGPT ability to document a code for us that a little bit more complex compared to just our simple function? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, well, document the following Python script. And basically what you see here, I included the exact same code that trains a machine learning regression model that I showed you earlier. Let's go ahead and test it out. It's going to tell you, well, sure, here's an example. Here, basically added the doc strings here. We didn't have that before. It's telling you, well, this is the usage. Here are the dependencies, for example. These are the functions that we're using. Seaborn, pandas, matplotlib, numpy, xgboost, and scikit-learn. I'm going to tell you, well, the output from that code is a heat map. We have a histogram. We have scatterplot. We also have the model metrics, which is RMSE, MSE, MAE, and coefficient of determination, or R squared. And you can see the code as well, along with the documentation. Again, pretty incredible. And what I could do next, I can say, well, could you please explain the following Python script for me? So if I say explain the following Python script, and I can simply go ahead and I'm going to copy the exact same code that I showed you before. This is the code that trains a machine learning model. Let's see what's going to happen. What you get here, well, this Python script performs the following tasks. I'm going to import the data. I'm going to import the libraries. I'm going to display the first top 6 instances. We'll display the feature columns. And then we are going to check the shape of our pandas data frame. And then we're going to check whether we have null or missing elements or not. And then we're going to generate histograms, plots, scatter plots, and then afterwards split our data to training and testing, train an XGBoost algorithm, evaluate the model, make predictions, calculate the metrics, and display as well all the metrics using the print function. Again, super powerful. Okay, what I could do next is I can say, well, could you please add comments to the following script? And what you see here is basically I removed every single comment that I had in my code. So here I just have only the code lines. And I'm just saying, okay, instead of adding the doc strings, I would like maybe to add comments to the following script. And let's see if that works. And you press enter. Sure. And here we go. It's going to tell you, well, import necessary libraries. We're going to import or load our data, display the first 6 instances using the head method, display the bottom 6 instances using the tail method, display the feature columns. Again, super powerful. Generate histograms, check if you have missing values. And again, you will see comments. It's actually very, very accurate. And that's pretty good. So now we tested ChatGPT ability to write doc strings for us and to also add comments as well to our code. Okay? All right. So that's it. That's simply all I have for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it and see you in the next lesson. ChatGPT can help you convert from one programming language to another. Let me show you a few prompts. Hello everyone and welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we will learn how to leverage ChatGPT to basically convert from one programming language to another. Let's go ahead and start with a simple example. Let's assume that I would like to convert a code from Python to C programming language. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to say, well, please go ahead, convert this code, which is a very basic, simple function in Python. I just want to convert it to C. Let's go ahead and see. Here we go. It's going to tell you, well, here is the equivalent code in C, and this is simply the code. Of course, if you're familiar with C programming language, it's a little bit, I would say, the syntax is not user-friendly as compared to Python. Python is very clean here. You won't see any curly braces or semicolons, but here you will see base semicolons. You will see there are some curly braces as well. And okay, looks pretty good. And it's also explaining to you what that code actually performs. Okay, what I could do as well is I can say, maybe I would like to convert that code to MATLAB instead. So I'm going to say convert this code to MATLAB instead. Let's go ahead and test it out. Here we go. It's going to tell you, well, this is the result basically of the function, but in MATLAB or MScript. So here's going to tell you, well, this is the name of the function. Then you specify the output variable. You give the function a name, and then this is the basic MScript, basically, if you're familiar with MATLAB. And it's also explaining to you here what that function does, which is, again, super powerful. Well, what about Java, for example? Let's see. Okay, we're just testing out ChatGPT ability in multiple programming languages. Here we go. Again, this is pretty incredible because now you can see you can basically write the code once and you can convert it to multiple programming languages. All right, so what we could do next, we can say, well, what about maybe C++, for example? Here is the equivalent code in C++, and this is simply the code. Again, you can leverage that. Again, ChatGPT pretty much knows every single programming language out there. Okay. What I would like to do next is I would like to basically ask ChatGPT to train an artificial neural network model to perform image classification using TensorFlow and Keras. And what I'm going to do afterwards is basically I'm going to ask ChatGPT to convert from one framework, which is TensorFlow and Keras, to PyTorch. And let's see if that works. We're going to say write a code that trains an artificial neural network to perform image classification using TensorFlow and Keras. Please know that TensorFlow is simply the Google's framework to build, train, and deploy AI and ML models at scale. And Keras is simply a high-level API that sits on top of TensorFlow and just simply allow us to build artificial neural networks using a few simple lines of code. So let's go ahead and test it out. Again, this is incredible because now you have an AI that is building or training or giving you the code to another AI that does image classification. So here we go. Basically, here we have it's imported TensorFlow for us. And then it assumed that we have our Cypher10 dataset, which is a benchmark dataset. And then here we're scaling or normalizing the data. And this is simply how we build our model using Keras API. So you will see that here we're building multiple convolutions, multiple max pooling layers, and then we have conv2D. We flatten it up, and then we have a dense, fully connected artificial neural network. Again, if you're not familiar with that, don't worry. This is just the code that trains an AI for you to perform image classification. And it's also here explaining to you what that code performs. And this is kind of the scary part. Basically, what I'm going to do next, I'm going to say, could you please convert this code for me to PyTorch instead? And here we go. Here is the equivalent code in PyTorch. So here's gonna basically, you see they're gonna use the exact same data set. And here you will find that we are training or building the exact same neural network. Here we have convolution layers, max pooling layers, and then you will find fully connected artificial neural network here. And this is exact same code, exact equivalent code, but in a completely different framework, which is PyTorch. And again, this is pretty incredible. And it's also, of course, explaining to you the code here at the end. Okay. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask ChatGPT to develop an AI that is similar to ChatGPT using Keras. Basically, I've asked ChatGPT to build itself. And we are going to conclude basically with these few lines of prompts. So I'm going to say develop an AI that can perform similar tasks to ChatGPT using Keras. Let's see if that works. Okay, developing an AI that performs similar tasks to ChatGPT using Keras would involve building a deep neural network or deep learning model that can generate text based on input prompts. And here they use a technique for recurrent neural networks and transformer architectures. And here we go. Basically, what you see that this is simply the code here that basically build an LSTM network or long short-term memory network. And you find that basically here you are training the model afterwards and generating text out of it. And what you notice is basically here they used recurrent neural networks and LSTM networks. And the technology behind ChatGPT is actually based on transformers. So I'm going to say, well, what about writing this code to include a transformer architecture instead of, let's say, LSTMs, something like that. Sure, here is an updated version using transformer architecture instead. And here we go. You will find that, again, the code is very well documented. You see here generating input and target sequence. And this is simply the definition of the transformer layers that includes self-attention. And this is simply the exact same architecture that is used behind the scenes when we train these ChatGPT models. Again, pretty incredible. Here we're generating text and also explaining as well what that code actually performs. What I could do next, I can say, well, could you please convert this code to PyTorch? And of course, if you make spelling mistakes, ChatGPT is quite smart to actually correct it for you before generating the prompt. Here we go. You will find that here we're loading the training data. Here we're loading the testing data. Here we're defining the neural network architecture, and you'll find that there is a transformer-based here model that has been captured, and defining the loss function, training the model afterwards, and then evaluating the model. And of course, you can include explanation as well at the end. Okay, I know this is quite, and I would say scary as well at the same time. So what I'm going to do, and that would be the final basically prompt that I'm going to say here, I'm going to say, can AI replace in the future? I know this is kind of a big question mark, and I got asked that question a lot. Well, it's going to tell you. It's a diplomatic answer here. So I'm going to say, basically, AI can automate certain tasks performed by developers, such as generating code or debugging. However, it's unlikely that AI will fully replace developers in the future. Developing software requires not only technical expertise, but also creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, and communication skills. While AI can automate some of these repetitive tasks and mundane tasks, it cannot replicate the human abilities required to software development. But please note that what I see is you can use these tools to kind of supercharge your productivity. And that's kind of the reason behind all these series of videos. And that's it. That's all I have for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you in future videos. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that you found it informative and enjoyable. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them down below. We appreciate your feedback, and we would love to hear from you. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this one. We have a lot of exciting new content, and we don't want you to miss out. Until next time, happy learning.